Welcome, and thank you, Janet, for giving us your time today.
Thank you for having me. So this is my favorite subject.
So Janet, what inspired you to write your book and share your near-death experiences with the world?
Well, after experiencing the NDEs that I had and the other spiritual moments that the Creator showed me, I was given a directive to understand the moments because they matter. But after this review that I had, which wasn't an authentic life review, because it was of my entire life, and some of it hadn't happened yet. And there was no emotions attached to it. From what I hear about life reviews, when we have our life review, we feel the emotions that are involved and the ripple effect from all perspectives. And that wasn't the case for me, but I was given a directive to understand the moments. So now that all the moments have happened and they've manifested and played out, a bigger picture of life and the intricacies made perfect sense. And this is valid for everyone, not just for me, even though it was a story of things that happened in my life. You can relate it to moments similar to in your each and everybody's life as well. So let me give you an instance of one of these films that God showed me that came to play out. It included a white building and the word namaste. I'd never heard the word namaste. Actually, I had heard the word. I didn't know what it meant. I Googled it. I couldn't find the word on the internet, and I just couldn't find it anywhere. So I was left, hanging there. But it was years later that I found a coupon on a popular coupon sharing website at that time. And the coupon was for something called a soul painting. And it intrigued me because I saw my soul during my most intense NDE. So I thought it would be fun, to have her create what her artist strokes do. And I asked my daughter if she wanted to go along with me, and she was excited, and she said, "Of course I do." So I made an appointment, and on the day of the appointment, we drove to the town where she was located, which was 45 minutes from where we live, and we stopped for lunch. After lunch, we drove to the building, and it was that building, a white building with the word namaste over it that I was shown during my third near-death experience, because I recognized the building. And then when we entered the building and asked for the artist, we were told to go over this bridge that separated one office area from another. We would find the artist's office on the left-hand side after we exited the bridge. And halfway across that bridge, we looked to the left and saw her door, and on the door was the word namaste. And that's what she had instead of her name. And I said, "There it is, Gina. That's it. There's the word namaste." So that's when I asked her, what that word meant. And she said, "It means that my spirit honors your spirit." So I was supposed to come to know that term because, after all, we are all spirits, living lives in our clothing here. We call this our temple, I guess you could say, and working together. So, but before the artist started, she asked me if I knew what soul painting was. And I thought maybe she'd paint what she thought my soul looked like. And since I knew my soul was blue, the color of the sky on a beautiful day, I thought if she was authentic, she'd paint something blue. But she said, with your permission, with the sitter's permission, I say a prayer. We all say a prayer together that the gatekeeper of the heavenly records show us what is meaningful to the sitter, which in my case was me. And of course, I gave it to her, and then the gatekeeper shows her in her mind's eye what she's supposed to paint. And so she said, "This is interesting. I see a lot of circles." And she was putting them on the paper in no particular, it wasn't a theme like she was drawing off of something, it was just everything came together at the end. And she used colors to describe our nature, like orange is the creativity and yellow is analytical, pink was love, and purple was intuitiveness. And I had a lot of pink and purple in there, which I knew I had a lot of love to give, but I didn't know about the purple. So I guess I have a higher sense of intuition, I guess you could say. So, but she periodically would come over and read my energy as well. And about 45 minutes into the hour-long session, I started to recognize what she was drawing. And it wasn't anything that I even could have imagined. And my daughter recognized it too, because what she had painted was part of my near-death experience. She painted Jesus that I saw and the light of God next to him. And I just blew my mind. I thought, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? Because this was supposed to be meaningful to me, and it was meaningful to me, but I had no idea what I was supposed to do with this. So I was shaken, needless to say, when I left, not knowing what to do, and I still was remaining quiet. And then I went to a movie that was on in the theaters at that time, which was Heaven is for Real, the little boy that had that, yeah. And he saw the same Jesus that I saw, and it was in the same stance that I saw. And so everything was pointing back to that NDE, that I was supposed to be doing something with it. And I know what to do. So finally, I went home and I said, I don't know what you want me to do. Just tell me. And so I went to bed and I said a prayer, but I said a prayer in a way that if I didn't get an answer, that would be my answer. So then I wouldn't have to say anything, because I'm a shy person. I wanted to stay, in my comfort zone. But after saying the prayer, I went to sleep, not expecting nor even wanting an answer. And the next morning, just as I was waking up, the room transformed. And God showed me visions of me writing a book and talking about it. And he told me to make it about him. And then I had the answer that I didn't want. And I knew I had to write the book. And the rest of the day, I sloughed around. And I said, you had to ask, didn't you? Now you've done it. Remember that adage, be careful what you ask for. So then I knew I had to write a book and talk about it. So, but not all the moments had played out at that point. So I started working on the ones that had, and then as they started playing out, like this one was later on in life, the soul painting, there was more images and videos that happened after that. And it creates a beautiful story of everybody's lives and how we work together and how he puts things in our pathway for us to find, like that coupon. If I had seen that coupon and chose not to follow up on it, that would have been my free will, but just think what I would have missed out on. And he does that with everybody. He puts little gifts out there for us to find. So, but now that everything's happened and I understand what was being shown for the most part, but life is an evolution. More things keep coming around that even are more clear as time goes on. So that's why I created the book Dying to See Revelations about God, Jesus, our pathways in the nature of the soul. And it relates to everybody. And I'm also nearing the end of a second book that features other people's spiritual experiences as well. And it's important to remember that moments in all of our lives are there for a reason, and we're supposed to be learning from them. Just like in my life, my family, and nobody knows what makes each person what we are, because my family didn't know about this. I didn't have a web presence. The only person I had told about my experience was my daughter, Gina, because I figured everybody else would judge me and they wouldn't believe me anyway. So she was the only one that knew. So there's no way this artist could have found this information out in any way. And that's made, all these experiences have made me the person that I am today. And the only other person that knows this, or entity that knows this, is God, Jesus, and his spirit that lives inside of us, because they live a life and they know our thoughts and everything, as we go along in life. So I find it very interesting that he says in scripture, and I'm not a religious person, but this is in scripture. He says, "For what you do to the least of man, you do to me." That's because he's inside of each and every one of us. So when we're critical with another person, we're critical with him. So I learned to be very careful about what comes out of my mouth, and I always evaluate: is this how I want to share my love? Because we're all learning as life goes on. So that's why I wrote the book. I was given a directive to do it.
Can you describe one of the most profound moments from your near-death experiences and how it has impacted your understanding of life and spirituality?
Sure. One of the most profound moments I experienced was my encounter with Jesus during my main big near-death experience, and also watching my spirit leave the bottom half of my body. I could watch my spirit leave the lower half of my torso because I was the spirit that had already left and then exited the upper part of my body. So that's why I could watch it. And there was at one point where, just by my desire to watch this blue energy lift out of my legs, I was down at my waistline watching this blue energy lift up. And once it did leave the physical body, it drew up toward me. And then I morphed into a different form. I was that blue energy that left the body. Then I transformed into a glowing orb of light, just like the glowing orbs of light that either came or left in all my NDEs. Jesus and God came as orbs of light from a distance in my third NDE, and in my first NDE, the two entities that were in that near-death experience left as glowing orbs of light. So I believe that is how spirit uses to travel, is the orb shape, because they were either coming or going. But I also changed into a white translucent form of a person during that experience too. So it indicates that we as spirits can change form as we need or desire to. So we're not stuck with having one specific form. So that made a lot of difference in my life.
I noticed that you were describing getting back into your body, that you were referring to yourself in third person. Can you explain why you're explaining it in this way?
Sure. Because I watched my spirit leave my body, and I changed form 3 different times, which indicates that we can change forms as we would desire to. And we have alternate forms but once I re-entered my body, I turned back into that blue spirit energy, and I sat my butt, me as a spirit, sat my butt down in Jan's butt, and I slipped a spirit leg into each one of her her physical legs, and I grabbed my spirit knees and rocked back and forth in her body until I could get up enough momentum to lay back down and settle into her body and help her sit up and gasp for air. That indicates to me that my spirit is the real me, because I still had the thoughts of who I was. I still knew the people in my life. That was just merely my clothing. The physical body is merely what we have chosen to wear during our life.
And how do you believe your experiences can help others in their spiritual journey or in understanding their own life path?
Okay. I believe my experiences can provide comfort and guidance to those seeking to understand their purpose and the nature of their souls. By sharing my journey, I hope to inspire others to recognize the divine messages and presences in their lives and embrace the spiritual paths with faith and courage. Additionally, there is a section in my book that encourages readers to evaluate their lives in the rearview mirror, because it's only after we look back on things that have happened in our life that we can see what problematic instances keep repeating in life, or because when problems keep recurring, we haven't learned our lesson and we haven't implemented the learning, or they wouldn't be happening over and over again. A lot of this happens in relationships when we're growing up. So unless we change our way and our choices, we might always seem to get into the same difficult situations. So it's only through grasping the education and implementing the change that we can check that off as learned and go on to our next lesson. That section also gives new insight into the people who we may have soul contracts with, because that was part of what I learned as well. When we look back on the people with a new view, a new spectacles, and understanding the paths crossed for a reason and for learning, we can view them with a new kind of understanding. They may have been difficult in our life. They may have been downright mean individuals or horrible individuals, but we've learned something from them. And it's usually through adversity that we gain most of our learning and advancement, if we learn to overcome it and move on in life and not let it draw us down always. So that if they read the book in that section and do those practices in their life, they'll figure out who has soul contracts with them. And a lot of them are family. Like my daughter was in my near-death experience, and she obviously wanted me to be her mother, because she came into my first near-death experience and was talking to my guide. And I obviously knew on some level that she was my daughter, because I thought of her as the music box lady, because she came riding in on the most beautiful music I'd ever heard. It sounded like angels singing. And I also thought of her as Daddy's little girl, because there was one point in time where she moved up and away, and I thought Daddy was putting her up on a pedestal. So at some level, I knew she was, going to be my daughter, but I didn't know it at that time. I was 15, and she wasn't going to be born until 15 years later. But she wanted to make sure that I got back into my body that night, or she wouldn't have been born 15 years later. So we have contracts like that.
So your first near-death experience was at the age of 15.
Yes. Yeah, that
And
was the first actual near-death experience. There are levels to near-death experiences. And the first ones were lower level, but they were still qualified as good near-death experiences, because they had all the elements in them. But it was the third near-death experience that blew everything apart, and I could no longer disregard it, what was happening.
mentioned that your experiences include aspects of various religions. How do you reconcile these different spiritual perspectives in your beliefs?
I focus on the universal truths and that I encountered during my near-death experience, such as love, compassion, and the interconnectedness of all life. These are common themes across many spiritual traditions and have led me to a more inclusive and holistic understanding of spirituality. So it's not, even though I grew up in a Christian family, these things cross over between spirituality, sometimes into Buddhism and into other religious factions as well. As long as they're made of love, what's the difference?
What advice would you want to give to someone who is seeking to understand the purpose or nature of their soul?
Okay. I encourage individuals to seek deeper connection with their inner selves and to remain open to divine guidance. Meditation, prayer, and reflection can provide insights into one's purpose. Meditation was one of the first things that I started doing. And if you go into meditation not without any expectations and just waiting for either colors or something to rise up in the darkness there, then you will find more and more things happen. And if we live with love and gratitude and a sense of adventure while trusting, in the divine guidance, that it's also essential. And on my website, janettarantino.com, is a blog page that gives information on the ways spirit communicate with us. I recommend listeners read the blog and practice those teachings because they use all of our emotions to connect with us. They don't have a body, so they don't have a voice. They use our thoughts, our inner feelings and emotions to connect to. And I give great examples of that on that blog. It's a series of blogs. So I suggest that they also try them. You don't have to say them out loud. Say them in your mind if people are around. But you'll find out that you're going to start recognizing them. If you notice that, let me give you an example. I was looking for a letter my uncle wrote to me one day, and I couldn't find it. So I asked the angels, please help me find this. And I blanked out everything in my mind, and I waited for something to pop up. Well, nothing did. Well, I went upstairs and I came back down the steps, and my eyes were drawn to the corner of the table. I ignored it, and because I was going to pop some popcorn. But I didn't have any popcorn in my cupboard, so I went downstairs to my pantry. And when I came back up, my eyes were drawn to the corner of the table again. I thought, okay, that's twice now. My eyes have been drawn to that corner of the table. So I went over, and then I picked up, there was a few pieces of paper that I had checked before, but the very bottom item my letter was stuck to the bottom. But just by taking that up piece by piece, that's where I found that letter. But it's simple things like, drawing your attention to something, or drawing your attention to a book. That was another thing. My eyes were drawn like a metal to a magnet when I was looking for a book on dreams to help my daughter out one day. They use a lot of different ways to communicate with us. And there's examples in my blog. So, and besides, it's a lot of fun. If you ask for them to help free up a parking space, but if you keep thanking them every time you notice it, you'll realize it's happening more and more because you're recognizing them.
Now, you mentioned that after your last near-death experience, you couldn't ignore it, I guess. Is that when you really got on the spiritual path and you started sharing your story?
Well, I was the first one, I was 15. I didn't care. I mean, I was changing schools, and I was interested in dating and getting into school activities. I never forgot it. And I always would watch the ceiling because I knew that I could sense something up there watching me, but I didn't know what it was, but I was able to push it aside. Then in the second near-death experience, I was in my 30s, and I had managed to keep everything in my life as normal as possible. And I was saved by divine intervention in that near-death experience. But I couldn't tell anybody because nobody would believe me anyway. So I kept that quiet. And then the third near-death experience was when I had an allergy-induced near-death experience, and left my body and met Jesus, God. And that's when I saw my spirit energy leave my body. And that's when I was shown all these moments in my life and told me to understand them. When I didn't want to go, I wanted to go to heaven because, you're surrounded in the most magnificent peace, love, and tranquility that it's not even possible to have in this world. And it was glorious. I didn't want to leave it. I wanted to go to heaven. And so the angels came for me because they knew I didn't want to stay here. The angels came for me and showed me the immediate future is if I chose to go, my death, it was going to show my death. So what they did is jump me ahead in time, to where my body would be discovered. And during that time frame, I had become one with the universe and could be in all places at all times. I could be the driver of the ambulance. I could be sitting in the ambulance. I could be still up in the sky watching it. I could see my husband and I in the bedroom below. And I was okay with my death. Everything they showed me, I didn't matter to me. I still wanted to go to heaven. So then they jumped me back in time, and I was immediately in front of the light of God, just about to enter heaven. And they showed me one more image. And that last image they showed me was my middle son, Kurt. And just by seeing his image, I knew something was going to happen to him in the future. And if I wasn't there to help him, his life would go down a pathway that would not be so good for him. So that's when I chose, because I love my kids. I'd do anything for my kids. And I told Jesus I wasn't ready to go yet. And that's when, he nodded his head. I couldn't see his face clearly because it was so bright. And I was going, and of course he was radiating light everywhere too. But the love in his heart that he had for me and for every single one of us was so magnificent. But I told him I had to stay. And so he nodded his head, and that's when I sat back down in my body, as I described to you before. And so I obviously had a contract to be with my son Kurt as well through that difficult time. And if I hadn't been there, then he would have had not such a good life. So I stayed to make sure he had a good one.
Did your family take it? Like, I know when you went through the stuff, we didn't have, like, nowadays we have internet, right? We have so much community out there for people who have experienced those kind of things. But like during your time, there's none of that. So how did you go through that process, and how did your family react once they found out about your experiences?
Well, I didn't tell them about my experiences until the book was out. So, and I didn't understand them totally back then. So I went to doctors wondering what was going on with me. And so I was seeing a psychiatrist. Of course, I was going through a divorce at the time too, because he didn't understand what was going on with me. When they don't understand or even have the empathy or compassion to understand it, they kind of push you away and they think something's wrong. Well, fortunately today, more is known about near-death experiences. And when I went through the hard times, and sadly my husband had to go through it in those times too, I was seeing a psychiatrist thinking, that I had some kind of mental problem, which I didn't. They did diagnose me, but years later, I was told that was not the case, because I was feeling worse on the medicine than I was off. So I decided to take myself, work myself off. I don't recommend anybody does that, but it was because they discontinued one of the medicines that made me feel kind of halfway normal. But when I went off that, I felt like myself again. So then I knew I needed to work off it. And so I did talk to my doctors, and they monitored me. And then afterwards, after I was off of it, they realized they had made a mistake. And fortunately, in today's society, with all the information they have available, people don't have to go through things like I went through back then. But my family were very, they're understanding, because I was seeing doctors at the time. And, but it was difficult. It was difficult for everybody involved. But now everything makes sense to everybody.
And how is your son doing?
He's doing great. I was there for him during the instance that I was supposed to be there. And now he is a a handsome young man, well, older man now, but with a beautiful daughter, 13-year-old daughter who I had last week, which was a lot of fun. And he has a beautiful life with a lot of kids. And yeah, he's making a difference in his life too with all these kids, which was supposed to be the case.
What is your definition of God?
Love. He's love in its purest form, unconditional love.
And what has
That's
been
all
the
I can say about him because he's everywhere. He's everywhere, everything, and love in its purest form.
and what has been the most important life lesson you've learned in this life?
I would say that love is the only thing that matters, and we are spirits living an earthly life.
And just with everything that's happening around the world, there's a lot of chaos. Um, do you have any insights to what is taking place and where we're going with this?
No, I don't for this one. I did for a previous one that had immigrants coming through Europe when Andrea Merkel, invited people to come to Germany. And she was actually encouraged to do that because I saw that in a vision during my near-death experience. And what God was doing was bringing people together so that we would realize that we are all the same thing. We don't have to be divided like this. There's going to be difficult people in every nationality, but we can't judge everybody by that either. So, but he wants us to know that we are all the same.
Now, when you were on the other side or when you met Jesus, did you see any other beings? Did you interact with any other beings, or just Jesus Christ that you had, that conversation?
Jesus, God, yet my guide, who is I call him watcher angel because all he does is watch me. And of course, my daughter, I saw in that one. My guide is a sumo wrestler, by the way. Oh, who would believe that? But when I saw him, I saw him when I was 15, and it was later on in life. I went to a medium because I was trying to understand mind-to-mind communication and how it worked, and if psychics got their information that way. When I went to this psychic, James Demos was his name. I didn't know his specialty was connecting people to their guides. And he said, "Oh, wow, I see you have a really strong guy. You must have needed a lot of protection." And he said, "It's a sumo wrestler." I said, "Oh my gosh, I saw him when I was 15." So I saw him. But as far as interdimensional entities, no, I didn't see any of those. They all looked spiritual to me.
What advice would you want to give to someone that is going through pain and suffering? Maybe.
Understand it's short-lived. It may not feel like it right now, but I've been during those times with the medication and stuff. I felt like life wasn't really worth it. But I had this inner voice that was telling me, just hang on, it'll be over with. And it was. It's just a minute portion of our entire lifetime. So we can get through it. Just seek the guidance and doctors that you need at the time, and be open to the guidance that Spirit gives you as well. And understand that everything is love, and just say your prayers and ask for help from heaven as well.
And if people want to connect with you, they can connect with you through your website or any.
Yes, that'd be a great site. On my website, I have the blog page, and I've got other pages as well. All my social media links are on there. The icons to my social media links. And there's at the bottom of the page is where if they want to sign up for more information about my book next book when it comes out, because it's going to be fantastic. So before I leave, can I mention one other thing?
Of course.
Okay. On my YouTube channel, because I'm a YouTube host as well. during my parents' last 5 years of their life. I felt like I had a contract with them, and I just felt like I needed to take care of them the last 5 years of their lives, which I did. And I asked them during that time frame, because they knew about my experiences by then, because was working on my manuscript when I was living with them, taking care of them. And I asked if they would share with me everything they experienced through their dying process and let me write about it. And they agreed to do that. But on the day my dad died, I happened to be there. I was actually international at the time, visiting my fiance at that time. And when I got the news that he was dying, which was unexpected because he was doing well when I left. So I hurried home and was able to spend the last 7 hours of my life with him, and his life with 7 hours of his life. But because I had traveled 17 hours, everybody was sleeping. So I thought I'd take a nap too. And I woke up at 1:30 in the morning for some strange reason. And I had the sense that I needed to take videos, because I wanted to take videos of his breathing to show the nurse if I had questions. But I actually captured his spirit leaving his body. And it's on my YouTube channel. And it whips out of the body so fast going to the right. It looks like a car light, but there's no chance it can be a car light, because outside my parents' windows, and he was on an interior room with no windows in a facility, and houses blocked any car lights from possibly even reaching his room. But when I slowed the video down to get a better look at it, it changed directions. Because it was going to the right, which would have been away from my mom. But when I slowed it down, it was actually going to the left toward my mom. It was, that's propellers move so fast, they look like they changed direction. He had whipped out of his body so fast, it looked like he was going to the right, but in reality, he was going to the left. And I slowed it down even further in a separate video on my YouTube channel, and it looks like they're spiritual beings there with him, because there's like 6 shafts of light with him moving to the left toward my mom, because I think he was going over to say his final goodbye to her before he went to heaven, and then she died 9 days later. And I tell about the spiritual happenings between his death and her death, because he eventually shows up for her before she dies, the night before she dies. It shows that love transcends, transcends dimensions, and that we never really die, because it shows his spirit leaving his body. So I'll catch that. It's
We'll
up
have
to
to see
around
you.
650,000 views right now.
Thank you for that. I will definitely check that out. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Uh-huh.
And thank you for sharing that with us as well. I
Sure.
really
Uh-huh.
appreciate it. And Janet, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having
Namaste.
me.